What is the name of this
River
place
Park
here?
Center.
River Park Center.
Andy, you can go first, and then we'll
Okay.
go to Brandon. Brandon, are you asking the question?
Sure.
This isn't your,
The world awoke today to shocking news that has left Hollywood reeling and sent shockwaves throughout the nation. The bodies of the legendary actor Gene Hackman and his beloved wife Betsy Arakawa were discovered under circumstances that were so mysterious and so deeply disturbing that authorities immediately suspected that they were the victims of a murder. But what shocked detectives and fans alike was not simply the abrupt and devastating loss of a film hero. Rather, it was the astonishing finding that his own daughter, Leslie Ann Hackman, had become the primary suspect in the investigation. In the past, Leslie Ann was regarded by the public as a loyal daughter. However, she has since disappeared, which has sparked a desperate manhunt across the country that has significantly intensified. It is believed by the authorities that she has managed to escape the nation, leaving behind a trail of questions that have not been addressed, strange behaviors, and possible dark secrets. What could possibly have caused Gene Hackman, a person of his own flesh and blood, to become involved in conducting such a heinous crime? The unrelenting investigation of this highly personal family tragedy by the FBI has brought it to the attention of people all over the world. Fans from all over the world are having a difficult time comprehending the terrifying idea that a member of Hollywood aristocracy was betrayed by a member of his own family. There has been an increase in the amount of media coverage, there is widespread conjecture, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation is in a race against time to locate Leslie Ann before vital evidence is lost for good. To be more specific, what exactly took place at the Hackman estate on that fateful evening? Why does Leslie Ann continue to evade justice? Are there deeper, more sinister secrets that have not yet been disclosed? Or is it possible that a daughter could actually be capable of something so horrifying? This startling revelation is just the beginning of the conversation. The huge Hackman estate, which was previously a symbol of status and tranquility, became the scene of unthinkable horror when officials reacted to a terrifying wellness check. The house was snuggled in solitude and had been a symbol of it in the past. After observing an unusually long period of silence and calls that went unanswered, the neighbors became anxious. When the officers arrived, they discovered that the property was eerily quiet, and the beauty of the land was instantly obscured by an uncomfortable silence. The investigators uncovered a shocking find inside the lavish home: the lifeless bodies of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, lying together as if they were sleeping sweetly. However, their deaths were everything from pleasant. The detectives were perplexed by the scene. Despite the fact that there were no indications of a violent struggle or marks of forced entry, the mood in the room conveyed a spooky story. Absolutely terrible things were going on. Investigators rapidly became aware of concerning particulars, such as the fact that critical medication had not been used, that personal possessions were properly placed, and that there was a worrisome absence of an immediate explanation for the couple's deaths at the same time. This was not a death that occurred naturally. Rather, something much more ominous had taken place. In the hope that science could provide an explanation for what intuition could not, the authorities dispatched forensic teams to the scene. The horrifying findings were quickly revealed by the medical examiners. The toxicology findings revealed that there may have been interference with Gene Hackman's medical device, which was his pacemaker. This raised instant suspicions of foul play, despite the fact that the situation appeared to be peaceful. Surveillance cameras were suddenly turned off. Unexpected activity was captured on the sophisticated security systems of the property, and weird GPS coordinates were tracked to regions that had no obvious relation to the pair. All of these factors contributed to the further increase in the mystery. An inside job was instantly suspected by the detectives, which meant that the person who knew the Hackmans well and had unrestricted access to their everyday lives was responsible for the crime. They were shocked to discover that their own daughter, Leslie Ann Hackman, was the primary suspect. The authorities made the discovery that she had secretly visited the estate on multiple occasions over the past few weeks, for the purpose of gaining access to vital personal and financial information. A number of worrisome pieces of evidence were rapidly cobbled together by investigators, indicating that she had handled sensitive documents, made unauthorized bank transactions, and altered important estate paperwork just a few days before their deaths. It became abundantly evident when the Federal Bureau of Inquiry, FBI, intensified their inquiry that the death of Gene Hackman was not an accident. Rather, it was methodically organized. The evidence pointed in the direction of Leslie Ann. Leslie Ann, however, disappeared without a trace just as the authorities were drawing nearer. leaving the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, to scramble to unravel a complex web of deception and betrayal. A family tragedy has been transformed into an international drama, and a desperate manhunt has been launched in an effort to uncover the truth behind Hollywood's darkest secret to date. The stunning and unnerving discoveries that were made at the Hackman estate have sparked an action-packed inquiry. Evidence that pointed clearly towards a trusted family insider was discovered by the FBI as they increased their investigation into the horrifying deaths of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. These indicators were distressing since they pointed straight towards the family insider. With each new piece of information that was uncovered, the already tragic situation became even more ominous, and the shadow of suspicion continued to fall ever more heavily around Leslie Ann Hackman, the daughter of the marriage. During the early stages of the investigation, forensic experts analyzed the sophisticated pacemaker that Gene Hackman had been using, and they discovered evidence of deliberate tampering. Technicians in the medical field confirmed the presence of atypical interference, which consisted of signals that had been purposefully modified in order to disturb regular cardiac rhythms. For such an act to be carried out, not only was technical expertise required, but also an in-depth familiarity with Hackman's private medical records, which were information that only a small number of people had access to. At the same time, digital forensics investigators from the FBI analyzed security footage from the estate. Investigators were able to obtain segments of film that showed Leslie Ann entering and exiting her parents' home at unusual hours, despite the fact that some cameras had been suspiciously disabled. Considering that each visit occurred precisely at the same time as a security breach, the agents were led to think that she had intentionally destroyed the surveillance equipment. These equally alarming financial actions were discovered by the forensic accountants working for the FBI. Quite recently, Leslie Ann had made significant changes to important estate documents, which resulted in the transfer of major assets into accounts that she entirely controlled. These activities were hardly covert. Substantial sums of money had been sent overseas, specifically to accounts that were located in nations that are notorious for having lax financial control and weak extradition treaties regarding financial matters. It was the evidence that Leslie Ann had conducted significant online research in the weeks leading up to the deaths of her parents that caused the agents to be particularly concerned. Her search history on the internet revealed that she had conducted several searches regarding methods to disrupt medical devices, disable house surveillance, and arrange for the rapid movement of huge sums of money without arousing suspicion. A distressing image of premeditation, greed, and deliberate planning was painted by the digital trail, and it was disturbing. Last but not least, witnesses came forward, including neighbors, friends, and business associates. All of these individuals related recent encounters with Leslie Ann that they had now realized were quite suspect. When seen in hindsight, the conversations that she had casually started regarding her parents' health, financial concerns, and inheritance took on a terrifying importance. Every piece of evidence strengthened the investigators' convictions, proving beyond a reasonable doubt that this was not a tragic accident or an act of random violence. As time went on, it became increasingly apparent that Gene Hackman's daughter, who was supposed to be his most trusted guard, was the mastermind behind this deliberate betrayal. On the other hand, Leslie Ann disappeared before the authorities could face her, which left the FBI in a state of disarray, the public in a state of shock, and everyone wondering what other secrets she had concealed. Who precisely is Leslie Ann Hackman, the woman who is at the center of one of the most heinous scandals in the history of Hollywood? Up until very recently, she gave the impression of being nothing more than the cherished daughter of a legendary actor, having a life that was relatively private and away from the spotlight. But when the detectives peeled back the layers of Leslie Ann's seemingly typical existence, they discovered a woman who was motivated by great hidden motives. They discovered a woman who was capable of deception, manipulation, and potentially even much more serious things. Over the course of their whole relationship, Leslie Ann and her father appeared to have a healthy connection. They were frequently pictured smiling warmly together at occasions, giving the impression that they were close to one another. Friends of the family, however, highlighted disturbing dynamics behind closed doors. These dynamics included tense encounters, angry conflicts over money, and a developing resentment over her father's wealth and position. In spite of the fact that Gene Hackman was very discreet about his financial situation, he had never been willing to give up control of his enormous money. On the other hand, Witnesses have recently disclosed heated conflicts in which Leslie Ann requested a greater involvement in managing his assets and aggressively pushed for influence over the family's multi-million-dollar inheritance. The hatred that Leslie Ann had towards her stepmother, Betsy Arakawa, was recalled by her friends. Leslie Ann had accused Betsy Arakawa of controlling her father's fortune and restricting her access to it. The rising desperation that Leslie Ann was experiencing was depicted in a distressing manner by more evidence. She had covertly accrued huge debts through unsuccessful investments, wasteful spending, and high-stakes gaming, according to the documents that detailed her financial situation. These debts were ones that she was unable to pay off without instant access to her inheritance. There was a disturbing motivation behind these disguised financial problems. Leslie Ann needed money fast, and the murders of her parents would allow immediate access to their wealth. After doing further investigation, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, found out that Leslie Ann had covertly engaged estate solicitors and financial experts in the weeks leading up to the terrible events. She had methodically calculated how much she stood to benefit from the untimely death of her parents. Currently, the authorities have a strong suspicion that Leslie Ann, who was driven by her ever-increasing debt and her aspiration to achieve financial independence, meticulously planned and executed the sad events, fully anticipating that she would inherit millions of dollars before anybody could discover her involvement. Her life, which had been relatively tranquil, had all of a sudden become chaotic, exposing stunning levels of betrayal and desperation. The carefully constructed facade that Leslie Ann had been putting up fell apart as the FBI got closer, which resulted in her quick and dramatic flight to another country. The authorities suspect that she is currently seeking to flee punishment, leaving behind a family legacy that has been crushed and questions that have not been resolved. As a result of dark secrets, hidden intentions, and a hunger that had apparently led her down an inconceivable path of treachery and murder, the once loving daughter of Gene Hackman had become Hollywood's most wanted fugitive. She turned out to be the most wanted person in the industry. The FBI's net quickly closed in on Leslie Ann Hackman as the inquiry became more intense, turning a family tragedy into a national scandal that was explosive in nature. Quick action was taken by the investigators, who were confident that they had finally identified their primary suspect, who was the cherished daughter of the legendary celebrity Gene Hackman. FBI agents issued search warrants on Leslie Ann's personal dwellings and financial institutions. They were armed with incriminating financial evidence, troubling digital trails, and testimony from eyewitnesses for the purpose of conducting the searches. What they found was so shocking that even seasoned investigators were shaken to their very core. Agents discovered hidden safes inside her luxurious condominium in Santa Monica. These safes included encrypted hard drives, bundles of cash, and passports held under numerous aliases. The safes were neatly placed as if they were prepared for a fast departure. An additional set of unsettling disclosures was discovered by the forensic accounting team of the FBI. In a methodical manner, Leslie Ann had liquidated a variety of family assets, transferring vast quantities of money into offshore accounts that were impossible to track. These transactions began some weeks before to the passing of her parents, indicating that careful planning and premeditation were the driving forces behind them. Additionally, the investigators discovered that Leslie Ann had communicated with real estate agents from other countries as well as private aircraft charter businesses, indicating that she was clearly planning an extensive escape route. Leslie Ann's behavior became increasingly unpredictable and paranoid as she was subjected to endless surveillance at this time. She quickly stopped communicating with others, including her family and friends, further isolating herself as the authorities were closing in on her. Her anxious chats with unknown connections overseas were obtained by wiretaps that were recorded by the FBI. These conversations were about urgently discussing strategies for escape, new identities, and methods to elude international extradition. They were convinced that they had uncovered a cruel, deliberate plot that was carried out by a lady who was willing to go to incredible measures for financial gain. The increasing evidence created a bleak picture, convincing FBI authorities that they had discovered the plot. On the other hand, Leslie Ann became aware of the investigators' plans just as they were making preparations to catch her. In a final act of desperation, she suddenly disappeared, evading law enforcement and escaping from their grasp just a few hours before they carried out an arrest warrant. As FBI officers raided her apartment, the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Leslie Ann Hackman was suddenly on the run, dangerous, desperate, and with nothing left to lose. This startling change of events sparked a manhunt throughout the entire country, transforming the once private daughter of a well-known celebrity into the most sought fugitive in the United States. Leslie Ann Hackman made her daring and dramatic escape, changing herself overnight into a fugitive on the run. This occurred as federal officials were fast closing in on her. Upon coming to the realization that she was only a few hours away from being arrested by the authorities, she executed a meticulously planned escape, which was a desperate gamble to avoid being captured and to escape the consequences of her alleged crimes. In the security footage taken at a neighboring private airport, Leslie Ann was seen rapidly boarding a chartered private plane while wearing a disguise and displaying some obvious signs of anxiety. The audio from the surveillance system captured her giving the pilot instructions to file a modified flight plan in order to deceive the investigators. The flight plan was supposed to fly south at first, but then it abruptly veered north into international territory. Utilizing vulnerabilities in aircraft tracking and airport security, she methodically plotted her escape path in order to accomplish her escape. Leslie Ann had already crossed into foreign territory and vanished completely off the radar by the time the authorities became aware of her duplicity. Agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation rushed to make contact with international authorities in order to inform them about the now international fugitive. On the other hand, Leslie Ann had chosen locations that were expressly renowned for having weak extradition laws and financial systems that were weakly monitored. This demonstrates that she possessed amazing forethought and ingenuity. The authorities found a terrifying video clip that Leslie Ann had left behind, which was a defiant and cryptic message professing her innocence and accusing detectives of conspiring against her. The footage was discovered by the authorities several hours after her departure. Fans, members of the media, and Hollywood insiders were all shocked by her remark, which fueled significant debate over her true motivations and probable accomplices. Her message went viral. While this was going on, team members from the FBI started following her throughout the world, frantically piecing together evidence from surveillance data and financial transactions. Leslie Ann, who is now thought to be armed, dangerous, and desperate, was described in urgent alerts that were distributed to airports across Europe, Asia, and the Caribbean. A Hollywood family scandal was transformed into a global problem as a result of a global investigation that was now underway. As a result of her speed and dexterity in escaping, the detectives were taken aback. At this point, the authorities were confronted with formidable hurdles in terms of both jurisdiction and logistics. They were also required to manage international rules, foreign diplomacy, and an increasingly complex investigation landscape. Once considered to be little more than the subdued daughter of Hollywood nobility, Leslie Ann had successfully evaded capture in a manner that was reminiscent of a seasoned criminal mastermind. As the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, did its best to catch up, Leslie Ann's trail grew cold, leaving investigators with the concern that her strategic maneuvering could forever postpone the administration of justice. An accused killer who was desperately trying to evade punishment, leaving behind unanswered questions, broken emotions, and a destroyed legacy in her wake, the lady who had once walked red carpets beside her renowned father was now being sought across continents. In light of the fact that Leslie Ann Hackman is currently a fugitive on the international stage, the Federal Bureau of Investigation initiated an urgent and persistent global manhunt. Overnight, the daughter of Hollywood nobility became one of the most sought individuals in the United States of America. Her photograph began to circulate around international airports, border checkpoints, and law enforcement organizations all over the world. Following the issuance of red notifications by the federal authorities, law enforcement agencies in over 190 countries were placed on high alert conditions. Agents diligently tracked every available hint, including bank transactions, travel logs, and digital footprints, all with the goal of locating Leslie Ann as quickly as possible. Leslie Ann had clearly anticipated international law enforcement techniques, taking strategic advantage of countries with little cooperation on extradition concerns. However, each stage of the chase revealed new problems which she had not foreseen. As the investigators probed deeper, they discovered alarming links that Leslie Ann had discreetly created in countries that are infamous for harboring fugitives. Dark contacts in Eastern Europe, Central America, and the Caribbean were part of her network. These are places that are well known for providing fugitives with the opportunity to remain undetected, frequently in luxury and security, for an extended period of time. A thorough investigation into encrypted correspondence and offshore accounts was conducted by agents, which led to the discovery of evidence that Leslie Ann was employing sophisticated techniques to conceal her identity. Several pieces of evidence suggested that she had already gotten fraudulent documents and various passports, which would have allowed her to cross through international borders without being discovered. Whenever it appeared like the authorities were getting closer, Leslie Ann deftly disappeared, leaving behind a sense of exasperation and concern among those involved in the investigation. With the help of global intelligence services, the top international fugitive team of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, coordinated their activities and diligently combed through evidence and leads from informants. According to accounts from international media outlets, every turn of the investigation was meticulously followed, and updates were broadcast around the clock. As citizens all over the world watched the tragic story develop in real time, the public's interest in the Hackman manhunt increased at an exponential rate. There was an increase in the level of pressure with each passing day. The authorities were concerned that Leslie Ann might never be brought to justice and would instead remain in the shadows forever. Despite this, the agents continued their diligent search, certain that someday her carefully manufactured facade would break down. Up until that point, Leslie Ann remained a ghost, haunting the investigation being conducted by the FBI. She served as a perilous reminder of the frightening depths that one could reach when pushed by despair and have been betrayed. A firestorm of public speculation and dramatic media coverage was sparked by the emerging crisis in Hollywood, which was responsible for the scandal. Gene Hackman, a well-liked figure who had spent his whole career on screen exemplifying honesty and honor, was suddenly at the center of one of the most enigmatic mysteries in Hollywood. As the horrific information became public, the business wrestled with astonishment, denial, and a disturbing silence that only served to reinforce suspicions throughout the sector. Theories, some of which were plausible and others of which were crazily fanciful, arose on social media. The question of whether Leslie Ann acted alone or whether darker forces inside Hollywood's elite might have influenced her actions was a topic of discussion among millions of people. Hashtags such as Hollywood Secrets and Hackman Conspiracy were trending all over the world, despite the fact that accusations were flying freely. There was an attempt made by everyone, from entertainment writers to online sleuths, to put together a story that may explain this unfathomable atrocity. Former colleagues and associates of the Hackman family provided contrasting narratives, exposing glimpses of strain that had been concealed beneath the glittering veneer of Hollywood. The fact that celebrities and industry elites, who are typically outspoken on social issues, were conspicuously silent fueled the concerns that Leslie Ann's activities might expose greater Hollywood corruption and collusion. The headlines of tabloids, on the other hand, were filled with allegations of conspiracies, avarice, betrayal, and even suspected cover-ups involving high-powered agents, managers, and executives from publishing companies. Quite a few people pondered out loud whether Leslie Ann was a renegade actor motivated by personal avarice, or whether she was a part of something far more sinister, a manifestation of the hidden culture of deception and betrayal that exists in Hollywood. The devoted followers of Gene Hackman have expressed their indignation and sadness. Candlelight vigils were held all along Hollywood Boulevard in honor of his renowned career. On these occasions, mourners expressed their sorrow not only for his untimely passing, but also for the heartbreaking betrayal that occurred inside his own family. In the meantime, a great number of people sought justice and urged the Federal Bureau of Investigation to investigate this horrifying story in its entirety. A cultural crisis was prompted within an industry that was already scarred by scandals as a result of the mystery that surrounded Leslie Ann's motivations, which became Hollywood's most closely held secret. People began to wonder how many other dark truths were still concealed beneath Hollywood's glittering surface, which caused the public's trust in the glamorous world of cinema to be severely shattered. Despite the mayhem, there was one fact that could not be refuted. Leslie Ann's treachery had broken notions of family loyalty, privilege, and celebrity. Furthermore, as the scandal continued to escalate, Hollywood's once proud image was permanently tarnished by mistrust, dread, and questions that were left unanswered. Investigators were in a state of urgent search for answers to the nagging question, why? As the intense global investigation for Leslie Ann Hackman proceeded, there was a more profound truth that was hidden beneath the alarming headlines, the widespread conjecture, and the scandalous charges. This truth highlighted the sad complexity that was behind this tragedy. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, built a narrative that painted a horrifying portrayal of Leslie Ann Hackman's descent from a privileged Hollywood daughter to a fugitive accused of murdering her own father. This narrative was constructed by piecing together forensic evidence, witness testimony, financial papers, and digital records. The desperation that Leslie Ann felt as a result of her massive debts, poor investments, and increasing carelessness with her finances was the driving force for her betrayal. When Leslie Ann's financial world began to fall around her, the investigators learned that she had secretly borrowed a significant amount of money from potentially harmful sources. She was also receiving mounting threats from creditors. The enormous amount of strain she was under, in conjunction with her long-standing hatred towards her father's controlled generosity, had plainly prompted her to commit an act that was beyond her comprehension. Evidence from digital forensics revealed that careful planning was involved, including the investigation of methods to covertly alter Gene Hackman's pacemaker in order to ensure that the crime would go undetected. Based on the surveillance records, it was determined that Leslie Ann had systematically disabled security cameras, altered financial documentation, and prepared herself for a speedy inheritance. Even seasoned investigators were astonished by the icy and calculating efficiency with which she carried out her operations. However, there were also terrible emotional components that were discovered by the investigators underlying the merciless financial reasons. Leslie Ann was portrayed by her friends and family as a lady who was highly torn and quietly plagued by emotions of inadequacy, bitterness, and solitude. The fact that she had become estranged from Gene Hackman, particularly after he had married Betsy Arakawa, had made her feelings of insecurity even more intense. The investigators hypothesized that in her perspective, getting rid of her parents would be a symbol of freedom from the emotional suffering and terrible debt that she had been carrying. However, was she genuinely capable of committing such cruel deeds on her own, or did she go down this terrible path as a result of the influence of outside forces? The investigators continued their investigation into the odd connections that Leslie Ann maintained inside shady networks overseas, which raised the possibility that she was being manipulated by predatory individuals who took advantage of her vulnerabilities. In the current state of affairs, the evidence pointed in a clear and convincing manner to Leslie Ann's guilt. Nonetheless, questions continued to remain, plaguing everyone concerned. Did this turn out to be nothing more than a horrifyingly cold act of planned greed, or was Leslie Ann a pawn in a broader, more sinister scheme that has not yet been explained in its entirety? After several months have passed since the sad death of Gene Hackman, his daughter Leslie Ann continues to be a mysterious figure, concealed in a location that is far from the reach of justice. Her devastating betrayal, bold escape, and persistent evasion of international law enforcement have irrevocably tarnished Hollywood's sparkling image, casting shadows of suspicion and mistrust over the entertainment business. They have also thrown a shadow of mistrust over the entertainment industry, in the hope that Leslie Ann may one day come forward and bring an end to this tragic saga. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, continues to pursue every lead with unrelenting determination. However, as time goes on, the likelihood of reaching a conclusion decreases. One of the most terrible realities that the Hollywood community must contend with is the possibility that the complete story behind Leslie Ann's activities, as well as Gene Hackman's untimely end, will never be fully understood. In the past, Gene Hackman was lauded for his classic roles that portrayed courage, honor, and integrity. However, his reputation is now being eclipsed by tragedy and treachery from his career. Following his passing, the man who had captivated millions of people through his screen presence has left behind a frightening mystery, one that is steeped in greed, desperation, and broken familial relationships. As a result of the fact that this scandal has not been addressed, the tragedy that occurred with the Hackman family will continue to be an indelible part of the darker history of Hollywood. The question of whether or not the betrayal could have been avoided continues to be a source of concern for fans, co-workers, and investigators alike. Have there been any warning indicators that were missed? In addition, the most unsettling question is how a daughter who was born into a position of affluence and opportunity could be led to such a state of despair and violence. It is likely that these distressing concerns will continue to be unanswered until Leslie Ann Hackman is located. For the time being, the story serves as a disturbing reminder that beyond the glittering facade of fame can lie secrets that are deeper than anybody could possibly fathom. This leaves the world wondering whether the entire truth will ever come to light, or whether Hollywood's most recent tragedy will remain an unresolved mystery for the rest of time.